Let's read Mr. Picklepaw's Popcorn. Mr. Picklepaw liked to grow things. His backyard was full to overflowing with the things Mr. Picklepaw liked to grow. There were giant sunflowers as big as your daddy's head. Oh, much bigger than that. There were pink and blue morning glories running wild all over. Wild as a bag full of stray pussycats. Oh, much wilder than that. There were red and white radishes, crisp and crunchy, but mostly there was popcorn. "It looks just like regular corn growing," said Mr. Picklepaw, gazing down the rows, "but it's a much better crop. Next winter, when the sweet corn is all gone, I can sit by the fire and pop popcorn." By and by, the tall sunflowers dropped their petals. Mr. Picklepaw carefully collected their seeds. Some he put aside to grow more sunflowers from. Some he saved for his great-aunt Margaret's parrot. Some he cracked gently between his teeth and ate himself. "But nothing can beat hot, buttery popcorn," he said. Then one day it was fall. The green rows of corn growing in Mr. Picklepaw's backyard had been slowly changing color. Now Mr. Picklepaw saw that the leaves were all brown. "Time to pick my popcorn," he said. Each little ear, about as long as Mr. Picklepaw's middle finger, was perfect. The hard golden kernels were packed tight in shining rows. The ears rattled one after another into Mr. Picklepaw's brown paper bag. Soon the bag was full. Mr. Picklepaw brought another bag. Soon that one was full too. Then Mr. Picklepaw filled another and another and another. He began emptying his bags into bushel baskets. He filled one bushel, then another and another and another one after that, and another and another and another. When all the popcorn was in the baskets, Mr. Picklepaw carried them into the sheet iron shed at the back of his house. Then he counted them. "Why," said Mr. Picklepaw, "I have 29.5 bushels of popcorn." The tiny shed was packed tight from floor to ceiling, from wall to wall, with baskets of corn. Mr. Picklepaw scooped out half a dozen ears. "I want to see how well it is going to pop," he said. He carried the popcorn into his kitchen. He lit the stove, got out a deep pot, and poured a little oil into it. He put it on the stove. He took 2 ears of popcorn and rubbed them together over the pot, and the golden kernels fell split, spat, spatter into the pot. When all the ears were pulled into the pot, Mr. Picklepaw clapped the lid on. Then he shook the pot back and forth, from side to side over the heat. Soon the corn began to pop. Scruff, scruff went the unpopped kernels as they rattled across the bottom. Whop, whop went the popping corn. Woofle, woofle went the popped kernels as they slid around. When Mr. Picklepaw heard only the soft woofling of the popped kernels in his pot, he took it off the stove. Very carefully he lifted the lid. Oops! One last kernel exploded, sending a little fountain of popcorn over the rim of the pot. Quickly he slammed the lid back down. Mr. Picklepaw took a bowl from the cupboard. He melted a square of butter. Then he poured his popcorn into the bowl. Every single kernel had popped. Fluffy and white, they shuffled into the bowl, sending out a delicious smelling steam. Mr. Picklepaw poured the melted butter over them. He shook the salt shaker over them. Then Mr. Picklepaw sat down in his armchair and had a feast. Mr. Picklepaw went happily to bed, thinking of his 29.5 bushels of popcorn packed in the sheet iron shed at the back of his house. The next morning the sun popped up like a hot kernel of corn. The day grew warmer and warmer, as days sometimes do in the early fall. By noon, it was hot as the 4th of July. Oh, much hotter than that. Dear me, said Mr. Picklepaw. If this keeps up, I will worry about my popcorn stored in that iron shed. He went to take a look at the shed. Hot air was rising in wiggly, wavy lines from the roof of the shed. A small frown grew between Mr. Picklepaw's eyes. I think I will worry a little right now. That shed is almost as hot as a popcorn popper. But perhaps the day will cool off a little this afternoon. Mr. Picklepaw looked up at the sky hopefully. He thought maybe a cloud might come and cover the sun. By 1 o'clock, the day was as hot peppers. Oh, much hotter than that. I'd better stop worrying and do something, said Mr. Picklepaw. So he went and got a ladder. Then he turned on the garden hose. Up the ladder he went, carrying the garden hose with him. This should cool it down a little, said Mr. Picklepaw. But before Mr. Picklepaw had barely set foot on the roof of the shed, underneath him he heard a whop. Then another. Whop, 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 whoppity whop, it went. Oh, said Mr. Picklepaw, I'm afraid I'm too late. And he certainly was. The shed had grown as hot as a popcorn popper. As Mr. Picklepaw stood on the roof, 29.5 bushels of popcorn had begun to pop. Whop, whop, whoppity whop, whoppity whippity whop, whop, went the popcorn. As the kernels popped, they began to jostle their way out of the tops of the baskets. The baskets began to overflow. Popcorn pressed against the roof of the shed. It pressed and pressed. The roof began to rise. It carried Mr. Picklepaw with it. Higher and higher it went. Higher and higher went Mr. Picklepaw. Up, up, up went the pile of popcorn with the shed roof on top of it and Mr. Picklepaw on top of the roof. It went as high as the roof of the house. Oh, much higher than that. It went as high as the flagpole in front of the town hall. Oh, much higher than that. It went as high as the steeple on the First Methodist Church. Oh, much higher than that. How in the world am I ever going to get down? Said Mr. Picklepaw. He peered over the edge of the roof. Far below, he could see people running from all directions, looking up and pointing. I don't suppose they ever saw a mountain of popcorn before, said Mr. Picklepaw proudly. As he watched, the fire department came with their hook and ladder truck. They began to crank up their longest ladder. Up, up, up it came, but it did not come close enough. The fire chief shook his head. Then the police department came. They set up a loudspeaker system. Just sit tight, said the chief of police. We'll get you down. Don't go away, said the mayor. I won't go away, promised Mr. Picklepaw, even though they couldn't hear him. But Mr. Picklepaw could hear them. He could hear them over the microphone discussing ways of getting him down off the mountain of corn. Everybody, go home and get a shovel, shouted the mayor, and we'll dig away the popcorn till the pile gets low enough for him to jump off. The fire chief shook his head. It's too shaky, he said. The whole pile might collapse and bury him. Maybe he could slide down on that iron roof he's on up there, like a sled, said the chief of police. The mayor shook his head. Too steep, he said. Why, he'd slide clear into the middle of the next county before we could stop him. Maybe even further. Man could get hurt doing that. Well, I just don't know, said the fire chief. Looks like he'll have to eat his way down. Just then, a little boy who had been bouncing up and down excitedly ran up to the men. When will the helicopter get here? He cried. Helicopter, said the mayor. That's it. Helicopter, said the fire chief. Here, Sam, put in a call to the airport, he called to one of his firemen. Tell them we need a helicopter and a rescue crew up here right away. Half an hour later, while the townspeople cheered, a helicopter came and hovered over Mr. Picklepaw on his mountain of popcorn. A ladder was lowered and Mr. Picklepaw climbed up. He smiled happily. I always did want to ride in one of these, he said. Mr. Picklepaw gazed up at the mountain of popcorn sadly. It seems like a shame to waste all that lovely corn, he said with a sigh. Who says it will be wasted, said the mayor. Look at all those children just waiting to go to it. Mr. Picklepaw beamed. Then let them help themselves and welcome, he said. So all the children of the town came with buckets and baskets and shopping bags. Each one carried off as much popcorn as he possibly could. Soon the mountain of popcorn was just a hill. Then it was a mound. Then it was a small heap. When the last child had filled his basket for the second time, Mr. Picklepaw found he had about enough popcorn to last him for a week. So he sealed it into wax paper bags and put it away. That evening and in every house in town, mothers were busy doing things with popcorn. Some made popcorn balls, flavored with molasses and honey. Some made caramel corn. Some buttered it and salted it. Some added peanuts and syrup to it. They sprinkled it with grated cheese. They coated it with chocolate. And they ate and enjoyed it to the last fluffy kernel. Now, Mr. Picklepaw still likes to grow things. His backyard is still full to overflowing with the things Mr. Picklepaw likes to grow. There are blue-green cabbages as big as your head. Oh, much bigger than that. There are blackberry bushes as full of berries as a watermelon is full of seeds. Oh, much fuller than that. There are beans running up poles as high as a mountain of popcorn. Well, maybe not quite as high as that, but mostly there is popcorn. And every year since then, when fall comes and it is time to harvest the popcorn, the children come with brown paper bags and pick and pick and pick with Mr. Picklepaw until there is enough popcorn to last everybody through the winter. But they are careful to keep it in a nice, cool place. The end. Thank you for reading with me.